The observation deck of the space station buzzed with quiet chatter and occasional laughter. Jalen stood near the large enclosure that housed his unusual companion, a creature that many considered too dangerous to be tamed. It was massive, with scales that glimmered faintly under the station's lights, sharp claws, and eyes that glowed with an intelligence that rivaled even the most cunning of the alien cadets. A group of elite alien students had gathered across the deck, their voices dripping with mockery. "Look at the human," hissed one of the taller aliens, green-skinned and covered with intricate markings. "He spends hours talking to a beast. A real warrior would never waste time like this." Another alien snorted, pointing at the creature. "That thing could tear a ship apart in minutes, and yet he treats it like a pet. How laughable." Jalen heard the whispers and laughter, but he did not react with anger or frustration. Instead, he moved calmly around the enclosure, checking the creature's feeding system and adjusting the temperature regulators. The beast watched him silently, its massive head tilting occasionally as if it understood every word of the alien's criticism. One small alien, still new to the station, stepped closer, curiosity overriding fear. "Why does he spend so much time with it?" it whispered to another cadet. "It is dangerous. It should be locked up and forgotten." The older cadet shook its head. "Humans are strange. They don't seem to care about power or control in the same way we do. They bond with things weaker than them, or even stronger, and treat them with care. It makes no sense." Jalen knelt next to the creature, speaking in a low, soothing tone. The beast lowered its massive head, resting it near his shoulder. "Easy," Jalen whispered. "I'm here. We're safe." The alien students froze at the sight. They had expected the creature to roar, to strike, to assert dominance. Instead, it responded with calm, almost reverent attention. The group of aliens continued their mocking commentary, oblivious to the bond unfolding before them. "Look at that," one said. "The human thinks it listens to him. It probably doesn't. It's only pretending." Jalen straightened, meeting their gazes calmly. "Pretending or not, it trusts me," he said simply, his voice carrying across the room without anger or pride. "And that trust matters more than any display of strength." A younger cadet tilted its head. "Trust? From a beast? That is impossible. No creature that size can be controlled by someone so small." Jalen smiled faintly, not at their doubt, but at their lack of understanding. "Control isn't the goal. Understanding is. Patience, observation, and care, those are the tools I use, not dominance. The beast chooses to respond not because it must but because it wants to. That is strength." The aliens murmured among themselves, some still snickering, some frowning, confused by what they saw. The massive creature blinked slowly, its sharp teeth glinting faintly, but it remained still, calm, and attentive. It was a living demonstration of restraint, intelligence, and trust, qualities that the aliens had dismissed as irrelevant in the human approach. One particularly arrogant cadet stepped forward, crossing its arms. "You waste your time with this thing," it said, voice loud enough for the entire deck to hear. "It is dangerous. One misstep and it could." Jalen raised a hand, stopping the cadet before he could finish. "One misstep for me and it could also harm me," Jalen said, gesturing to the beast. "But I have learned its signals, its moods, its limits. I know when to step back, when to guide, when to let it act on its own instincts. That knowledge is earned, not given. Something you will only understand when you form a bond yourself." The cadet blinked, momentarily speechless. The other aliens watched silently, sensing the shift in tone. Jalen was not angry. He was confident, calm, and unwavering. The creature, sensing its human's mood, let out a low, rumbling growl, not of aggression but of acknowledgement. "See," Jalen said softly, bending down to stroke the massive head. "It listens because it trusts. It respects because it chooses to. That is something technology, brute force, or arrogance can never teach you." The group of alien cadets began to feel a mixture of unease and fascination. They had expected fear or chaos, but instead they witnessed harmony, a balance of instinct and intellect, strength and patience. The human and his apex creature moved together like partners in a dance, each anticipating the other, each responding without command. As the observation deck lights dimmed slightly for a scheduled system check, the cadets could no longer find words of mockery. Their laughter had died away, replaced with hesitant curiosity. They could see, even if they did not fully understand yet, that the human's bond with the beast was more than a simple attachment. It was mastery through trust. Jalen stood, the massive creature rising beside him, muscles coiled but calm, eyes gleaming with quiet intelligence. "This is what respect looks like," Jalen said, voice steady. It is not earned through fear or dominance. It is earned through patience, care, and understanding. You may mock it now, but soon you will see its value. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, their mocking was quieted by awe. The human had not boasted or threatened. He had simply demonstrated a truth they had dismissed, that bonds even with apex predators could be stronger than fear, might, or arrogance. And for the first time, they began to wonder if the human they mocked might be teaching them something far more powerful than any combat skill they had learned in the academy. The hum of the space station was faint compared to the soft, heavy thuds that echoed as the enclosure doors slid open. Jalen stepped forward, moving calmly despite the tension in the room. Behind him, the massive apex predator stirred, lifting its head with a deliberate grace that immediately drew every gaze. Its scales shimmered under the observation lights, reflecting shades of bronze and deep green, while its eyes glowed with a sharp intelligence that made the alien cadets freeze in their tracks. The cadets had gathered as usual, expecting a chaotic display of the creature's strength or an uncontrolled outburst. But this was not what they saw. The beast moved with controlled precision, each step measured and deliberate. Its massive claws clicked softly against the floor as it followed Jalen's calm movements, every muscle coiled but relaxed. "Easy, easy," Jalen murmured, his voice low and steady. The creature lowered its massive head slightly, exhaling a soft rumble that seemed more like a greeting than a warning. The alien students stared, unsure how to react. Some took a step back, instinctively sensing the raw power in the beast. Others whispered nervously to each other, their earlier mockery gone. One of the younger cadets, still new and inexperienced, dared to ask, How can it follow you like that? It is huge. It could crush you in seconds." Jalen smiled faintly. "Because it chooses to," he replied. "It trusts me. That is why it follows. Fear alone would make it aggressive. Respect and understanding allow it to act calmly." The apex predator circled slowly, sniffing the air and observing the aliens with keen awareness. Every movement it made was calculated, deliberate, and purposeful. Its massive tail swept behind it, brushing the floor without causing harm, yet even that subtle gesture carried weight, signaling its presence and dominance. The cadets could not hide their astonishment. One of the older aliens, a tall figure with silvery blue skin, whispered to its companion, "It is magnificent. I did not expect such control. I thought the human would be devoured." The companion nodded silently, eyes wide as the predator lowered its head in front of Jalen, resting it slightly on the human's shoulder. The gesture was simple, yet it radiated trust and recognition. "Observe carefully," Jalen said softly, addressing both the cadets and the creature. "This is not a fight. This is not dominance. It is a partnership built on trust. Each of you relies on your technology, your weapons, your strength. I rely on understanding, patience, and respect. And it responds because that bond is real." The beast's eyes followed the movements of each cadet, its gaze sharp and calculating. It did not growl or attack. Instead, it maintained a quiet vigilance, measuring each movement, each step. Some of the cadets began to fidget, unsure whether to advance or retreat. One of them attempted a bold approach, leaning forward to examine the creature more closely. Jalen stepped slightly ahead, placing a hand on the apex predator's broad neck. "Easy," he said again. The creature exhaled, a low, resonant sound that seemed to warn the cadet without aggression. The student froze, realizing that the beast's calm did not mean submission, it meant awareness and judgment. Every motion was being observed, every reaction measured. "You see," Jalen said, gesturing to the cadets. "It is not mindless. It chooses its responses, weighs actions, and acts only when necessary. That is why patience and trust are more powerful than force. Never forget this lesson." The alien cadets watched, captivated by the display. They had mocked humans for forming bonds with creatures, believing it a sign of weakness or foolishness. Now they could see that the bond gave the human unmatched influence over a being far stronger and faster than any of them. It was a power of a different kind, one earned through empathy and care. The apex predator moved closer to Jalen, brushing its massive head against him in acknowledgement. The cadets could see the subtle communication between them, the tilt of a head, the shift of weight, the low rumble that indicated satisfaction. It was clear that the creature was not only obedient but genuinely connected to the human. One cadet, still hesitant, whispered, It listens. Not because it fears him but because it wants to." Jalen nodded. "Exactly. Fear can control but trust inspires. Respect can protect but understanding guides. That is the difference between dominance and partnership. The group of aliens began to see the truth of Jalen's words as the creature stepped back slightly, circling the observation deck in a slow, deliberate path. It was powerful, lethal, and entirely in control, not because of fear or training but because it had chosen to be guided by the human at its side. As the session continued, Jalen demonstrated simple exercises, guiding the predator through obstacle courses, showing how it could follow commands with precision, and even allowing it to react instinctively when needed. Every move emphasized coordination, mutual understanding, and respect. The cadets could see that this was not domination, it was a relationship of equals with trust at the core. By the end of the demonstration, the cadets had stopped whispering, stopped mocking, and even stopped moving. Their eyes were fixed on the human and his apex companion. They understood, in a way they had never considered, that the human's strength did not come from weapons or technology, but from a bond that bridged species, intellect, and instinct. Jalen stepped back, the creature settling near him, calm and poised. "This is what respect and trust can achieve," he said quietly. "Power is not always measured by strength or size. Sometimes, it is measured by connection, patience, and understanding. Remember this. It is more important than any weapon, any skill, or any technology you possess." The cadets exchanged glances, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and slowly growing respect. The beast had arrived, but it had done more than appear. It had silenced mockery, inspired curiosity, and forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humans and the creatures they chose to bond with. For the first time, the aliens saw the human not as a foolish engineer, but as a master of an entirely different kind of strength, one that came from empathy, understanding, and the rare courage to trust something far stronger than oneself. And in that realization, the room was forever changed. The observation deck was silent except for the low hum of the station's systems. The apex predator had settled beside Jalen, muscles coiled but calm, eyes flicking from one alien cadet to another. The earlier mockery was gone, replaced by unease and curiosity. Every cadet understood that this was no ordinary beast. They were standing in the presence of a creature capable of unimaginable strength, and it was not only controlled but willingly guided by a human. One of the older cadets, silver-scaled and towering, stepped forward, curiosity getting the better of caution. "I want to see if it truly respects him," it whispered to a smaller cadet nearby. "Let's test it." The younger cadet frowned, hesitant, but the older one moved closer to the apex predator. The massive creature's eyes immediately locked onto the alien, and a low, rumbling growl rolled through its chest. Jalen, sensing the tension, stepped lightly between them. "Patience," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Respect must be earned, not demanded." The alien paused, realizing the beast was not merely reacting out of instinct, it was aware, watching, judging. Each slight movement, each twitch of a limb, was registered. The cadet tried to extend a hand toward it, curiosity stronger than fear. The predator's gaze sharpened, muscles tightening. Its growl deepened slightly, a warning that carried the weight of its power. "Do not approach recklessly," Jalen said, his voice calm but firm. "It does not react to intimidation or aggression. Only respect, calm, and understanding will allow it to respond safely." The alien's hand hovered uncertainly in the air. The predator's eyes never left the cadet, and the rumble in its chest continued, low and measured. It was clear that any sudden move could trigger a reaction far beyond what the cadet could handle. Slowly the alien lowered its hand, stepping back slightly. The predator relaxed just a fraction, acknowledging the caution and respect shown. Jalen smiled faintly. "You see? Respect is not fear. It is understanding boundaries, recognizing strength, and approaching with patience. That is what earns cooperation from a being far more powerful than yourself." Another cadet, this one smaller with green-hued skin, whispered nervously to a companion. "I thought humans were weak. But he has control without force. And the beast obeys without chains or threats. How is this possible?" Jalen gestured gently to the predator, who lowered its massive head, brushing against his side. "It is possible because trust has been built over time. I do not demand obedience, I guide with patience. That is the difference." The aliens watched as Jalen began a series of simple exercises. The predator followed subtle hand signals, moved in precise steps, and reacted to gentle verbal commands. When Jalen paused, the beast stopped instantly, every muscle alert but controlled. The cadets began to see the truth in Jalen's words. This was not mindless obedience. This was a partnership, forged through time, understanding, and respect. One of the braver cadets stepped forward, attempting to test the creature's patience by moving quickly around it. The predator's eyes followed every step, muscles tensing slightly but remaining calm. A growl rolled through its chest, low and measured. Jalen's hand rested lightly on the creature's neck. "Control comes from understanding, not fear," he said. "It knows I am here. It knows boundaries. And it knows that sudden aggression will meet consequence, not out of anger but protection." The cadet froze, heart racing, realizing the lesson. The apex predator was not just physically dominant. It had the intelligence to assess threats, the awareness to act decisively, and the restraint to wait for a signal. The human had earned its respect, not through force, but through consistent care, observation, and calm authority. Jalen continued the demonstration, guiding the predator through a slow course of commands. The creature leapt, circled, and stopped on cue, every movement precise and controlled. The alien cadets could not deny the skill involved. They whispered among themselves, some in disbelief, some in awe. A small, hesitant voice spoke from the back. It listens, not because it fears him but because it trusts him." Jalen nodded. "Exactly. Fear may force compliance temporarily, but trust creates partnership. Respect ensures loyalty. That is the lesson of strength you cannot measure with weapons or technology." The older cadet, still uneasy, asked, "Could anyone else do this?" The apex predator's eyes flicked toward the questioner, alert and wary. "Not immediately," Jalen replied. "It takes time, patience, and consistent behavior to build this bond. The moment you demand or intimidate, the trust is gone. This is earned, not assumed." The aliens began to shift, realizing that their previous assumptions about human weakness were wrong. They had mocked a human bonding with a dangerous beast, thinking it a foolish endeavor. Now they saw that the human had mastered a form of strength far beyond mere physical prowess. It was subtle, quiet, and invisible to those who only relied on aggression or technology. The predator moved closer to Jalen, brushing against him with deliberate calm. Its massive tail swept behind it, a gentle display of presence and confidence. The cadets could see that it was not subdued, nor was it docile. It was aware, intelligent, and fully in control, yet it chose to follow the human's guidance. Jalen looked at the cadets, his expression calm and steady. This is what respect looks like. It is not earned by scaring, striking, or forcing. It is earned through patience, observation, and understanding. Only then does cooperation, and true power, emerge. The cadets were silent now, the lesson sinking in. The apex predator had tested them with its mere presence, revealing their arrogance, their assumptions, and their lack of understanding. The human had passed the test alongside his companion, demonstrating mastery not through force, but through connection. By the end of the session, the cadets had stopped all mockery. Some whispered to each other in awe. Some merely stared, overwhelmed by the clear display of human skill and wisdom. They had witnessed a bond that was stronger than fear, stronger than brute force, and far more powerful than arrogance. Jalen stood tall, the apex predator resting calmly by his side, muscles relaxed but alert. "Respect is a choice," he said softly. "And it is the foundation of strength that lasts. Remember this lesson. It is one you cannot learn from simulations or lectures. It must be experienced, felt, and understood." The cadets nodded silently, understanding for the first time that human strength could take many forms. And the apex predator, calm and aware, had shown them just how formidable that form could be. Jalen guided the apex predator toward the center of the observation deck, its massive claws clicking softly against the floor. The alien cadets watched with a mix of fascination and apprehension. They had seen the human's bond with the beast tested, but now they were about to witness the true depth of that connection. "Observe carefully," Jalen said, addressing the cadets as much as the creature. "This is not a show of strength. This is a demonstration of trust, patience, and communication." The predator shifted slightly, lowering its head and letting out a low rumble. Jalen placed a hand on its broad neck, giving a subtle signal. With a swift but controlled motion, the beast followed Jalen's guidance through a series of movements designed to test both its agility and obedience. It leapt over obstacles, circled pillars, and reacted to hand gestures and soft verbal commands, each motion precise and intentional. The cadets whispered among themselves, their previous skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. One of the taller cadets, covered in metallic blue scales, murmured, "I thought it would attack. But it moves as if it understands him." Jalen smiled faintly. "Understanding comes from time, observation, and respect. I do not command with threats or punishments. I communicate, I guide, and I respond to the creature's signals. That is how trust is built." Another cadet, green-skinned and shorter, tried to step closer, drawn by the creature's intelligence. The apex predator's eyes flicked toward the intruder, muscles tensing slightly. Jalen's hand moved in a subtle gesture, and the beast relaxed. "See," Jalen said calmly. "It is not fear that controls it. It is understanding and respect. That is the difference between dominance and partnership." The cadets leaned forward, captivated. They had trained their entire lives with technology and brute force, believing that control could only be asserted through power. Now they were seeing something different. A bond so strong that the predator followed a human's subtle cues without hesitation, without aggression, without fear. Jalen began a series of exercises to demonstrate how deeply the connection ran. The apex predator responded to minimal signals, sometimes a mere glance, a tilt of Jalen's head, or the softest of whispers. It paused when instructed, moved when guided, and even corrected its movements when Jalen adjusted his commands. The cadets could not hide their astonishment. One of the cadets whispered nervously to a companion, It is not mindless. It chooses how to act. And yet it obeys. Why?" The companion shook its head, unable to answer. Jalen overheard and spoke calmly, "Because it trusts me. Trust is earned, not forced. The moment I impose fear, that trust disappears. This is why patience is more powerful than aggression, and understanding more valuable than brute strength." The apex predator suddenly paused and lowered itself into a crouch, scanning the room carefully. One of the braver cadets moved slightly, testing the boundaries of the beast's patience. Its gaze followed, muscles coiling but not striking. Jalen stepped closer, whispering softly to the creature, and it exhaled a low rumble, easing its tension. The cadet froze, realizing that every action was being considered, every movement evaluated. "Notice the subtleties," Jalen said. "It communicates constantly through posture, gaze, and breathing. I respond, it trusts, and we act together. It is a conversation without words. That is the essence of bonding." The cadets watched as Jalen guided the beast through a final exercise, a sequence of jumps, spins, and precise steps through obstacles scattered across the deck. Each movement was executed flawlessly, a perfect combination of human guidance and animal instinct. No technology, no weapon could replicate this. It was a partnership built over months of observation, patience, and mutual respect. One of the cadets, pale-scaled and hesitant, finally spoke aloud. I think I understand. It listens not because it must, but because it wants to. It trusts him." Jalen nodded. "Exactly. That is what makes this bond powerful. Trust and respect are the strongest forms of control. Fear and aggression can force obedience temporarily, but true loyalty is earned through care and understanding." The alien cadets shifted uneasily. They had always considered humans weak, their physical strength inferior to most species. Yet here was a human commanding respect from a creature far stronger, faster, and more dangerous than any of them could face. And he did it without force, without weapons, and without intimidation. Jalen allowed the predator to settle next to him, its massive body relaxed but alert. "This is what you must remember," he said softly, addressing the cadets directly. "Strength is not always about power or size. It is about connection, patience, understanding, and the courage to build trust where others rely on fear. That is a form of mastery you cannot simulate in a lab or achieve through combat alone." The cadets were silent, their previous arrogance replaced by a quiet awe. The apex predator rested its head lightly against Jalen's side, a gesture of recognition and trust. The room seemed to vibrate with the lesson. Power was not only in force, but in bonds formed across species, in respect earned through care, and in strength expressed through patience. For the first time, the cadets saw human ingenuity in a new light. It was not about machines, strategy, or brute strength. It was about empathy, observation, and understanding the living mind of a creature far beyond their physical limits. And in that moment, they realized that the human before them had achieved mastery in a way that none of them had anticipated. Jalen stepped back, giving the predator space to move freely. The creature obeyed without hesitation, circling calmly, alert and aware. The cadets could see every subtle motion, every unspoken communication, and they understood, finally, that they were witnessing more than training. They were witnessing a living example of human ingenuity, patience, and the extraordinary power of bonding across species. By the end of the session, the cadets had learned their most important lesson. Respect, trust, and empathy could create strength far greater than technology or aggression. And standing beside his apex predator, Jalen exemplified that lesson with quiet confidence, leaving the cadets to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humans and the creatures they dared to bond with. The observation deck was quiet except for the soft hum of the space station systems. Jalen and the apex predators stood at the center, calm and poised. The cadets had been through the demonstrations, the tests, and the lessons, and now the moment had come for them to truly understand what they had witnessed. A bond of respect, trust, and partnership that transcended fear or force. Jalen turned to face the cadets. "You have seen it. Follow my guidance, respond to subtle signals, and act with precision," he said. "But the real lesson is this: it does not obey because it fears. It obeys because it trusts. Respect is earned, not demanded. That is the foundation of every bond, every alliance, and every act of true strength." The apex predator shifted slightly, letting out a low rumble that resonated through the deck. Its massive body was relaxed, yet every muscle was alert, aware of every movement around it. The cadets stared, captivated. They had expected a show of raw power, perhaps an exhibition of force, but what they saw was far more remarkable: calm intelligence and unwavering trust between human and beast. One of the taller cadets, silver-scaled and skeptical until now, stepped forward cautiously. "And it will follow anyone else who approaches?" it asked. The predator's eyes flicked toward the cadet, muscles tensing slightly. Jalen raised a hand, signaling the beast to relax. Its growl softened and it shifted back to a neutral stance. "Notice the difference," Jalen said calmly. "It responds to me because of the trust we have built. It will not respond the same way to anyone else, at least not without time, patience, and care. Respect is not granted automatically, it must be earned." Another cadet, green-skinned and wide-eyed, whispered to a companion, "I think I understand now. It isn't just strength that makes him powerful, it's the bond itself." The companion nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the human and his companion. The apex predator shifted, lowering its massive head and brushing gently against Jalen's side. It was a subtle gesture, but it spoke volumes: recognition, acknowledgement, and trust. Jalen guided the beast through a final series of movements. It leapt over obstacles, turned on a dime, and even paused mid-motion when instructed, each action executed flawlessly. The cadets could not deny the skill and intelligence involved. Every motion reflected a deep understanding between human and predator, a relationship built on patience, observation, and mutual respect. "You see," Jalen said, "obedience through fear is temporary. Strength without respect is fragile. But a bond built on trust, patience, and understanding creates power that endures. That is why it listens, why it follows, and why it respects me." The alien cadets were silent, absorbing the lesson. Many had trained their entire lives to rely on weapons, technology, and aggression. Yet here was a human commanding respect from a creature far stronger than any of them, and he did it without intimidation, without force, and without pride. It was mastery in its purest form. One of the younger cadets stepped forward cautiously, testing the waters. "If I approach slowly, showing patience and care, could it?" The apex predator's eyes flicked toward the cadet, alert but not aggressive. Jalen placed a reassuring hand on its neck. "Perhaps," he said softly. "But it will only respond if you approach with respect. That is the rule. Always remember, respect is earned, trust is built, and patience is the bridge between strength and understanding." The cadets watched intently as the predator moved beside Jalen, every movement deliberate, every response calm and measured. It was clear now that the beast's obedience was not blind, it was a choice. A choice made out of trust, shaped by time, and solidified through consistent care and communication. Jalen knelt slightly, resting a hand on the predator's broad head. "This is the essence of bonding," he said. "It is not about dominance, intimidation, or fear. It is about listening, observing, and understanding. That is the strength that lasts." The apex predator leaned into Jalen's hand, exhaling a low, satisfied rumble. The cadets were struck by the simple display: power tempered by trust, dominance replaced by partnership, strength harmonized with respect. One cadet whispered in awe, "We mocked him before, we thought humans were weak. But this is incredible. He doesn't control it by force, he guides it through understanding." "Yes," Jalen said quietly, addressing the room without anger or pride. "Strength without respect is empty. Power without trust is dangerous. But a bond built on patience, care, and understanding can achieve what brute force alone never could. That is why I have earned its respect, and why you should consider how you build your own strength." The cadets exchanged looks, some humbled, some inspired. Their earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by a deep curiosity and a dawning respect. They had witnessed a human surpass expectations, not by technology or brute strength, but through the power of connection. The apex predator settled beside Jalen, massive yet calm, muscles coiled in readiness but at peace. It had chosen its human companion, and that choice reflected the ultimate respect. Loyalty without fear, obedience without coercion, and trust without condition. Jalen stood tall, the predator at his side, and surveyed the cadets. "Remember this lesson," he said, voice steady. "Respect is the foundation of all strength. It is earned through patience, care, and understanding. If you can learn this, you will wield power greater than anything technology, weaponry, or fear can provide." The room remained silent, each cadet absorbing the truth. The apex predator's presence alone was awe-inspiring, but the bond it shared with Jalen was what left the deepest impression. Mockery and doubt had vanished, replaced by admiration and understanding. For the first time, the cadets saw a human not as weak or inferior, but as a master of a subtle, extraordinary power. One that could command loyalty, inspire trust, and achieve feats impossible through fear or strength alone. And as Jalen and his apex companion exited the observation deck, the cadets were left with a lesson they would never forget. True strength is earned through respect, and respect, once given and nurtured, creates bonds stronger than any weapon.